Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Geopolitics with Abu. To my returning subscribers, thank you very much for always joining. If you are just joining, please do like, follow, and subscribe to Geopolitics with Abu for exciting content on African geopolitics and security trends. Today, my guest is Godfred Zina. Godfred is as an analyst of DevSec. DevSec is a consulting agency that specializes in the provision of accurate information and assessment on security, politics, investment, trade, and other risks within Africa. Godfred, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Abu, for inviting me to discuss on this very important subject.
The topic for today's episode is the dwindling state of democracy in our very own continent, Africa. Godfred, the limited credibility of some of the elections happening across Africa is not happening in isolation now, but rather part of concentrated effort by incumbent and military leaders to insulate themselves from power and to consolidate power and further insulate themselves from the will of the people. This can be seen through series of tactics, which include weakening the independence of electoral bodies, weakening the constitutional court, and extending presidential terms. We are going for the purpose of this topic, we are going to look at three countries as case studies: Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Cameroon. Let's start with Togo. For Togo, in March 2024, the Togo lawmakers, which is dominated by the ruling party Union pour la République, voted to eliminate the presidential system and adopt a parliamentary system, which effectively eliminated the right of citizens to vote for their presidency directly and cuts down on presidential terms. It effectively consolidated the power of the Faure Yasimbe dynasty and led to protests, and protests are still going on even recently. So can you give us an overview of the political development happening in Togo?
Yes, and thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the subject. In fact, this topic I believe is very important considering the fact that we are looking at three dwindling states of democracy without focusing on countries that have decided to adopt a military system of governance. Why am I saying so? I'm saying so because democracy is very important, and most of the time, people just think democracy is just about electing someone, and after election, that is it. But democracy in its simplest term is a system that has been built for free, fair election. As so I said, elections, it has to be free. And then the rule of law must also work. And then respect for human rights, and then strong checks and balances must also be in place to enable the people to enjoy. For instance, the definition of democracy given by Abraham Lincoln, that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, speaks to it, which basically means that the political power is vested in the hands of the ordinary people, and then the government can be legitimate only when the people give them the authority to control. So, by this background or this definition of democracy by Abraham Lincoln, I'm just trying to contextualize this conversation around that so that we can be able to get the history of how democracy even came about in Africa before we can even move on to a more country specific in terms of Togo and Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon, as we are focusing on today. And so, although most African countries gained independence around the 1960s, but until 1990s, that is when a lot of multi-party and then liberal democracy now truly began to take place, where African countries now think that is the period or of a new dawn for Africa, because there were new constitutions that were taking place to allow for participation of citizens and also political parties all across. For instance, Ghana had its own new constitution under the Fourth Republic in 1992, and Nigeria also around 1991, and Togo also made some bit of changes here and there and improvement in terms of the constitutions in 1991. That was because it was a transition, from a authoritarian leadership to a democratic state. So a few changes were also made to that regards. So all these things basically means that democracy was very important at the time. But in recent times, as you stated clearly, there has been a lot of dwindling, and there is a newer amendment of the constitution in favor of the government of Togo, right? Which basically means that these are early signs, or these are signs to indicate that, well, this democracy that was hoped for the ordinary people may not seem to be so, because things are changing. And then instead of um, consolidating democracy, many African states are now reversing, you know, constitutional manipulations, erosion of civic liberty. We can see how the ordinary people are being abused, and then even the right to demonstration are being threatened. For individual to go out and then demonstrate and call for something that is right, the person is being attacked by the military and other security personnel, and the weakening institutions like the Electoral Commission and even the judiciary to an extent, because most of the time it moves from there, it moves to court. And then the court are also being controlled by major stakeholders in terms of all this to be able to control, which are basically being made by some individuals. Why am I saying so? Because, democracy is important to me. I believe democracy is important. And then inclusive governance, strength, respect for human rights are all drivers of development. I understand the other aspects and other challenges that always come in relations to this, but all these things drives to development. And then, but in recent times, authoritarianism, um, constitutional changes, and then presidents are now beginning to extend their um, their tenure. For instance, that of the Ivory Coast leader, decided to exchange his tenure over and over by trying to eliminate almost 2 terms because of the revised constitutions and the new changes and the new amendments that are in place. Yeah, not to drag it. Let me just move on straight to the case of Togo, which we have already stated clearly. After the uh, uh, the Nyashingbe family decided to expand their dynasty by passing it from father to son.
To son.
And yes, so it becomes like a family property. So
Inheritance, kingship.
you see, for instance, he like this Nyashingbe Yadema, he seized power in
Mm,
1967, and then around the 1991, he decided to make some few changes here and there for the constitution and for participatory democracy. Then he passed away into around 2025 thereabout, and then they gave the power to um his son. You know why? Because he was able to consolidate the military
mm,
personnel very clearly,
mm,
and also he was
mm,
also able to
mm,
set that rapport and that avenues that make
mm,
it smooth for his son to
mm,
be able to maneuver his way.
mm.
And then
Talking about
okay.
okay, go ahead, finish.
Yes, but after giving um after his son took over the leadership
Mm,
of Togo here and there, he
mm,
also, there were a lot of calls from civic agitations,
mm,
civic unrest, and
mm,
other people, were calling for the changes to allow for more term limits in terms of
mm,
the president and then other government officials. And despite all these calls, he found his way to always delay elections and always come on to win in a
uh,
controversial manner. And he has ruled ever since. But in 2019, when he decided to make these changes to set the presidential term limit by Allah, because a lot of people were calling for presidential term limit, right? You say you want presidential term limit, then I'm going to do it for you. So I'm going to create a newer constitution or amend the constitution in a new form
mm,
where we are moving from presidential to parliamentary. So now the president would now have no term limit, but will be elected by the parliamentarians, but
mm,
the prime minister who is not acting as the president, because he runs the
mm.
activities, the day-to-day
Of the
activities,
government, yeah.
yes, of the
Mm,
country. So he's now going to be
mm,
um imposed with that term limit, just to
mm,
allow him to
mm.
be able to stay in power for a
In power.
very a very long time. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Togo has been quiet, but all these things usually comes with a lot of agitations and a lot of unrest. In fact, Ghana shares border with Togo. So when this case
Mm,
started, people
mm,
began to demonstrate, and then the security decided to rage violence on them. Most of them decided to run into our country and for safety, and
uh,
then businesses within the border areas too were also very low due to
uh,
all these factors. But these are issues that would always arise when certain leaders
mm.
try to force themselves to remain in power for a very long time against the will of the people.
Yeah. Thank you very much for those comprehensive explanations. I just wanted to pick on something you said about the dynasty, how they've consolidated power. But it seems to me that there's now cracks within the dynasty of Nyasimbe because the sister-in-law, which was the former Minister of Defense, came out recently and asked the military to support the people instead of harassing the people to support the people and she also, in a way, in tactically called to an end for an end to the dynasty. So are we now beginning to see cracks? And what does if you are seeing cracks within the dynasty, what does this signify for the longer political outlook in the country?
Yes. So in every institutions, including the family institutions, there are always challenges here and there, especially when power is being corrupt. Absolutely, where an individual begins to get the overall power to control the state, and other family members are finding their ways to also get their way through, and they are not getting because of that authoritarian leadership style and that has been imposed. They are also looking at trying to also cut the public attention along them because they see this division in the house. So they try to find a way to get some sympathy, on the street, which would mean that they are not in full support. But, largely, this, despite she saying that, she has benefited a lot from this governance system, but there are certain concerns that she thought could have been implemented by the
Mm,
leader, which I
mm,
think it hasn't been welcomed per se by the president, and he's now trying to. But you can see, I'm just giving you an example for that of Gabon, where
mm,
the people were jubilating over the fall of the
mm,
former president.
mm.
What's his name? Um,
No, forgotten the guy's name.
yes,
It was with Trump. It was with Trump lately. It was
yes,
part of the leaders
yes,
that Trump mm, no
yes,
problem. Just go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. The
So
leader
yes,
of
so
Gabon.
yes, the
Mm.
leader of the former leader of
Well,
of, of of Gabon.
well, which is relative took over from him.
Yes,
Mm,
quite similar.
mm,
So you see that
mm,
people were saying that his father came in to take over leadership for a very long time, and then he has been passing it on to his son, and then the son is also trying to pass it to the grandson, which is going to be like a family when they live and live through. But despite the changes that happened, it still falls in the
family.
external family of the
Mm,
the previous administration, which means that to me, I believe there's not any much change in terms of
change, yeah.
the dynasty, because basically it's still uh,
Mm.
the same family that still rules there. So
Thank you very much.
similar instances could just be just opposed to that of Togo.
Togo. Thank you very much. And then for the Togo, As you know, that the military too, they've been, because of the dynasty, they've been involved in the governance of the country, which has distracted them from their mission of protecting the people and the territorial integrity of the country, with the insurgency in Burkina Faso also spilling across the border and instilling instability in northern Togo.
Mm.
Thank you very much for that. So let's look at Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire, they have a long history of electoral violence.
Mm.
The country experienced nearly up to 2 to 3,000 deaths following the 2010 election crisis, where the then President Laurent Gbagbo, refused to concede to the present president, who was the rightful winner, Alassane Ouattara. The rivalry between Ouattara and Gbagbo has long dominated the politics in Cote d'Ivoire. There seem to be kind of ceasefire between them, which following the return of Gbagbo in 2021, which was facilitated by his acquittal at the International Crimes Court, the ICC,
Mm.
after charges linked to genocide were preferred against him, which were struck out. And then Ouattara accorded Gbagbo past presidents benefits and all that. But following the decision of Gbagbo to enter the race again, the magnanimity has been overshadowed by a run-up to this current election, where candidates, even Gbagbo's wife too, has been eased out by the, which we're talking about, the independent electoral commissions that are no longer independent, where candidates that seem to be threatening the incumbent are being eased out, and this has led to protests in Cote d'Ivoire. And we can please, you can give us, also give us an overview of the political situation in that country. A very
Yeah.
important country, I must say. They are important U.S. ally in the region and the world leading producer of cocoa.
Yes, not only US, and you see France has also been in Cote d'Ivoire for a very long time, and even up to date, they still have a very good relations with the government of the Cote d'Ivoire, and even in fact, people were just opposing France colonization in Africa as to whether they came to extract our minerals and then keep us poorer, or they came to develop, and they were like looking at all the countries that were being colonized by France, it seems to be only Cote d'Ivoire that seems to have been improved um, quite well in terms of development of infrastructure and other systems, you know. But I think that is a debate that we could look at another time. But just to go straight into the point as to the crisis. Yes, for a very long time, um, Cote d'Ivoire were very peace, were very stable, and a stable
Mm.
democracy, you know. And
Mm.
even in fact, even after they emerged as from the 2010, 2011 conflict, like you indicated, there were a lot of ways that the government tried to do to consolidate and also to get the people involved just to reconcile the country after the war. And one of it was to give the former president his rightful um uh, remuneration,
Benefit.
yes, benefit remuneration from
Mm.
as a former president, you know. But
Mm.
that hasn't stopped the declining democracy that is happening in Africa or in La Cote d'Ivoire, for instance. Why am I saying so? Because after the crisis and the disputes, Laurent Gbagbo wanted to come back to power, you know, but
Mm.
because of a lot of calls that were calling him to, a lot of people calling him to come, just like Alassane Ouattara just came back to announce to us that people are calling him to come back and solve the solution. So a lot of people were calling for him to come and then assist, you know, in bringing peace and then much more development, because they think that Alassane Ouattara has been much more aligned to the West than they expected. So they want a much more leader who will be more focused in the development of the whole country at large, but not to external actors. And so
Mm.
with all, yeah, and so
Go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
with all these debates, you know, here and there, here and there. So that is why his wife now then decided to come, because if the wife is in power, automatically or
Mm.
indirectly he's also in power and
The
he's able to
husband.
manage the affairs of
Mm.
the country. But uh
Mm.
Alassane Ouattara's RHDP government, are also not comfortable with that decision, and to
Mm.
have the um the opposition or the main opposition that could be able
Mm.
to that can snatch power from them. Uh
Yeah.
yeah, they don't want to give him that benefit. And so yes, it has been very, very much. And just boils back to the point about the control of the court, and even the parliamentarians, how political they are, where they are able to amend this constitution to an extent that they are giving him 2 terms for free, should
Mm.
he contest again, in fact, as he has declared. And
Mm.
he has also stressed about the revision, which started in 2016, which people believe that, that revision would have brought in much more changes, because after the war, there were changes here and there. But
Mm.
he just came and then basically tell about the amendment that happened back then, and then his candidature, and then his party has fully endorsed him, and they want
Mm.
him to continue to lead, despite some initial plans and some arrangements that were made some time back, to get the deputy to take over from him. But because of the passing away of the previous leader that he decided to invest power on, he decided to come back to take over and could still control until he gets the right person he believes can be able to succeed him, for him to hand over power. And these are all factors. These are that leads to this. If there are no um uh, how do we call it, freedom of the people, one, transparency is not available, institutions are not working very proper. And as
Mm.
a leader, you would always think that when you leave power, what you are doing to other people is likely going
Mm. Will
to,
be done to stop.
yeah, to be done to you, because
Mm.
you have the control of the security system, the control of, in fact, every institutions in power. So mostly they
So,
think that they will
so
be
that's one
able,
of the reasons why they find it hard to leave
they
power.
find it hard to live. They find it hard to
Mm.
live. Yes,
Because of
because
fear of retribution.
exactly,
Yeah.
accountability. They fear to
Mm.
account to the ordinary
Yeah.
people here and there. So all
Yeah.
these things are factors, especially after the war. A lot of um, even within the war, during the civil war, there were a lot of agreements that might have gone for financial gains and other contracts, and all these things, if they are not done in the right way, the next government
Mm.
is likely to investigate all these things and then bring it
Yeah.
up again. And all those
Mm.
things are part of the fears of the government to hand over power. And they fear that the major opposition, in fact, most major oppositions are usually disqualified in states that have dwindling and
Mm.
democracies. For
Mm.
instance, the leader believes that because this person was able to attain this over 10%, or in fact more marks, and place second, he's likely to become to snatch the seat in case people decide to change their minds completely, And
Mm.
so all these things are factors, and the reason why they use these institutions to remove them and then put them aside and leave the people that are contesting, they are not stronger, and they could even influence them
Them.
financially,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, to
Yeah.
in the process.
Thank you. In Cote d'Ivoire's case, at least, they are making progress to address the growing threat of violent extremists that is spilling across from Mali and Cote d'Ivoire. They launched a program called the Programme Special du Nord in 2022, which include a combination of major security presence along the northern regions and investment in infrastructure, which was targeted as social intervention targeted at unemployed youth. And this initiative has been widely credited as contributing to the mitigation of militant activities in the country. I think Togo at least could learn from that, because Cote d'Ivoire is relatively handling the pressure from the Sahel countries relatively better than Togo and other coastal countries in the littoral areas. Thank you very much for Ivory Coast. Let's go now. Let's go to the final one. Cameroon. Well, Paul Biya, who ascended to power since 1982, is Africa's second longest leader, following Teodoro Obiang of Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, and his standing is for his eighth presidential elections. His party has held power since independence and maintained their grip on Cameroonian politics. Um, this cycle is different because I think the opposition leaders, 30 of them, they coalesced into and supported one strong candidate, which is Maurice Kamto. And recently, the Electoral Commission, I think, also banned him, which we're talking about. They banned the strong opposition candidates, and it's threatening the stability of the country. So, please, what are your thoughts also on that? Given the fact that Cameroon is very, very important to Nigeria, the whatever happens in Cameroon, because of the borders which we share along the Lake Chad, and the Boko Haram and Jas insurgency along the Lake Chad region. It's also important to Nigeria and other West African countries and regional security as a whole.
Yes. So
Mm.
basically, similarly, just the same thing, just like other African countries,
Yes.
where the democracies also come. In fact, there is this particular statistics that I wanted to give you, where it is only 8 countries in Africa that are actually practicing a lot of good democracy. You know,
Mm. And
uh,
Nigeria and Ghana are the ones for just our region.
yes, but the
Mm.
top eight countries, uh, most of those are the island countries here and there.
Mm.
Yes, so I think we had Cape Verde, and then we also
Cape
had
Verde,
yes, Mauritius, South Africa,
Mauritius. Mm.
Ghana,
Mm.
Seychelles, Botswana, Namibia, and Senegal.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
that are practicing a democracy that will allow people to say whatever they want to say but not to trample on the right of other people. Though
Mm.
sometimes some people think that freedom of speech it doesn't have, you don't have to account for it, and then they go to an extent of threatening the life of other people, and then at the end it becomes, yeah, but it's just cut across, just like I was indicating. This dwindling democracy is cut across all other African countries. And,
Countries.
and
Yeah.
you know, as you indicated, the president served for a very long time and now
Mm.
is leading, in fact, the number two um, in the whole of of the African continent, where he's been there for a very long time after amending the constitution in 2008 to prevent um or to allow for um president to lead, you know, eternally without any term limits. And I think that has been the main cause of why, even in fact, this elections, this October elections coming up, most people were thinking that there wouldn't be uh uh he wouldn't be contesting again. People were still doubting as to whether this man is coming to contest again. Will he contest? Who is he bringing on to replace him? And then most of his big wigs started to
Mm.
withdraw. Some of them were even
Mm.
contesting, and then they're not even stronger
Yeah.
than him, but they were also
Yeah.
as old as 98 something years. They were also still trying to go
Mm.
and contest, claiming they can also bring the change
Change.
that Cameroon needed.
Mm.
And then because of rumors that they believe that they were hoping he could allow them to replace him, but after they had been disappointed over time, they decided to
Mm.
step aside and then go contest on their
Mm.
own. And
On
just
their
like
own, yeah.
just like um any African count any African country that is having its dwindling democracy, you see that they use the electoral commission, and then even sometimes the court. Because, for instance,
Mm.
if you go and then they disqualify you in a way you don't understand, most of them
You
will
go to
usually
court.
go to
Mm.
court. And so the
Mm.
judges and even the the leaders, that takes action over there, are all usually being compromised just for it to go in favor of that. And similar thing happened in Cameroon, where and the opposition parties that were alleging that there's corruption, there's fraud, and then all these reforms should take place here and there. And then when they had a bit of then they were, for instance, in 2016, similar thing happened. And most of the time, because they are divided into the Anglophone region and then the Francophone region, um, there are usually candidates that come from either this side and then that side. And then all those people usually become much more competition here and there
Yeah.
to but the Anglophone communities are not that much compared to the Francophone. And that has been
Yeah.
yeah, I know the history
Yeah.
that even comes longer, where they even wanted to be part of Nigeria, where the case
Yeah.
even went to the international court for adjudication and here and there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just similar. And then the decline in the democratic norms is very evident. And then you can, like I mentioned about the electoral processes, and then for the abuse of candidate. In fact, there's one thing that is a very key point. Sometimes intimidation, they use other security personnel to threaten your life. You know, and this, but for the October 12th presidential elections, the
In Cameroon.
yes, in Cameroon coming up,
Mm.
where we had about 83 people contesting, to become presidents of their country. And the Electoral Commission decided to reduce the number very drastically. I understand it is about 13, yes, 13 or so, yes, 13 candidates has given the way to go through in the October elections. And um, and that alone shows that, I know sometimes it's not everybody. For instance, it is candidates. How are we even going to fold the paper to even go and vote? But although some are not qualified, some are also qualified. In fact, more qualified. But uh, the the systems try to move out those people that would be danger to the government, and allow them to rule for a very long time. That being said,
Eh, Go ahead. Go ahead.
That being said, the trend is very common. It's very common in Africa. For instance, you can identify the manipulation of the constitution, and then electoral commission, and then the institutions, on fairness, you know, on fairness that are also taking place, based on not only in courts but even in terms of the submission of their paper. And this thing happened in not only in Cameroon, but we can
Mm.
see it same in Togo, and also
Mm.
in Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
generation of the young Africans are also growing up, not only in some few countries, but these dynamics of democracy, and then the promise that are not being delivered. Young people are now
Yeah.
rising up, calling for accountability, calling for
Yeah.
opportunities, and then
Yeah.
trying to call for even international and other regional bodies like the
Mm.
uh, African Union. For the case of West Africa, we have the
ECOWAS.
ECOWAS, and then the ECAS, and then that of other SADC in Southern Africa, here and there. So yeah,
Mm.
all these things are very common, and it is not something that is new to the continent. And then this this thing and these dwindling democracies are having implications on on the security. We made mention about security here and there, about the various attacks. When you are consolidating power, for instance, in Cote d'Ivoire, the man came, or the president came to inform the people that he's willing to serve them. And then the people are calling for him to come, because they believe that he is the only one who can solve the problems, or the current problems that they are having in Cote d'Ivoire. And I'm just like, having served for almost 3 terms complete, you haven't been able to solve all this, and you want another term to enable you complete all these problems. But that is what he's saying. But days after saying all these things, a lot of young people came up on the street to agitate, call for him to
Mm.
um, step aside, and then get other candidates. So also
Mm.
a lot of demonstration. In fact, it was not the number was very huge. And as to whether he will listen, because he said he has listened to people and consulted, if he's going to listen to those views as well, or he's going to go ahead and contest. And a lot of people have been expecting or anticipating a replica of what has happened in Burkina Faso, what has happened in Mali, and what has happened in
Mali,
Niger.
Niger,
Even there were rumors that there were some military takeover. I think,
Côte
yeah,
d'Ivoire.
yes, in Cote d'Ivoire, there were rumors like
Mm,
that, but later the government
mm,
came and said it wasn't true here, and the people have been
mm.
anticipating because of the dwindling democracy. It hasn't given the people the liberty to even participate in elections fully, and those who are even there, a lot of intimidations, attacks here and there,
Yeah.
and then the removals of those people from their roles that they do play. So these are also implications that we see, and it is not only in La Cote d'Ivoire. It's similar trends happens in Togo, which we
Um,
may discuss of, but in the same thing in Cameroon, where,
Cameroon.
yes, where um young people are agitating. And but the Cameroon situation, because of the autocratic nature of it, it hasn't been
Mm.
able to spread much more wildfire like that of West Africa, because I think the security are able to control the situation much more clearer, uh in more abusive way. So people are very cautious on how they run these things.
Talking about the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon, it's very, very important, even to not only even to Nigeria, not only to Nigeria, the West African region, because of the proximity of the Bight of Biafra, which is in eastern Nigeria, because of that proximity to the where Douala littoral region, where there have been occasional attacks by the Anglophone separatists. Uh, so these issues will also this makes this election a very big concern to not only Abuja but to other West African countries and the region entirely. And there've been attempts to the leader of the Anglophone crisis was arrested in Nigeria.
Mm.
Ayuk Tabe was arrested in Nigeria
Yeah.
in 2018, and the SY presidents of the what they call it, the what they call the movement again, of the Anglophone crisis, of the Anglophone region. Is it Bakassi? No, it's not Bakassi. It's I forgot him, but he was arrested in Nigeria, and there were allegations that there were reports, though unconfirmed, that the Biafra movement, which is happening in the eastern region of Nigeria, that they were having a working relationship with the Ambazonian people in Côte d'Ivoire. And
Mm.
that's another frontier that, if it becomes widespread, can lead to another set of crises in the continent. I think so. These are issues that the entire region will be watching, considering the political crisis that is currently going on in
We,
in
we,
Cameroon. So thank you very much for that. Before we go, I wanted to ask you about something that caught my attention. Recently, the Ghanaian president, had a phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine, where discussions were held on acquisition of some Ukrainian UAV drones and all that. I wanted to know your opinion. Does that signifies the entrance of Ukraine as a foreign actor in West Africa and Sahel? Even though there've been reports that Ukrainian forces have been backing the militants against
yes.
the Wagner and African corp groups in the Sahel.
Hmm. I think that's quite interesting. And
Yeah.
before I even go deep, I think I just wanted to give some few recommendations before I go into this foreign policy issue.
Okay.
And you know, for democracy to work, for me
Yeah.
personally, I believe that the trends it has been all across African countries, and it's been a trend that is in existence for years. So I believe that institutions, international institutions, and regional blocs, like the African Union, must begin to work much more effectively in terms of implementing these democratic norms and laws that these countries have subscribed to, and then
But how
block.
can they? What are the? How can they have? Well, how can they implement it? Because we talk about implementation a lot, but then they don't have implementing mechanisms put in place, and I don't think they have the leverage to implement decisions because we've seen it happen. The coup in Niger, the coup in Burkina Faso, and ECOWAS was not able to do anything.
Yeah, even people were talking about the ECOWAS case. But you know, sometimes people feel like these kind of measures, such as imposing sanctions,
Mm.
suspending them for a while, it sometimes do bite to a larger extent. But other people do think that because they still have their liberty and that movement. So if as an African Union body that every African countries have subscribed to, and you believe in the values and of African development, and we have decided to go through the path of democracy, we understand the Western um, influence and also their interventions. Sometimes strategically, sometimes they just come in and take control of everything because our leader give them that right. But I believe that it could be much more partnership, in terms of that aspect. And so if we are able to partner with our Western counterpart and all African countries come together to implement this. And if you deviate from the rules, you are unable to trade among even. I know that trade within African countries
Very low.
and among African countries is much more lesser compared to trade with other countries outside the continent. But if we decide to implement these laws to prevent trade, most of the trade that happens along the borders, and we decide to all African countries that share border with that country that decided not to implement these democratic values and norms, they shut their borders from you, they prevent you
Mm.
from traveling to those countries, you are unable to
Mm.
trade with those
Mm.
countries, and you're now going to be dependent solely on external actors. I think it's going to be a much more deterrent to these leaders that are having. But sometimes most of these leaders, the challenge is that they are always given a much more bigger positions in these international institutions. For instance, that of Cote d'Ivoire, when the coup happened in Mali, and the ECOWAS tasked him to go and then call for democracy. How can this happen? Even in your own country, you are not democratic enough to your people. You get it. So sometimes they have to make sure that leaders that are not believing in the values of democracy should not even get a role or a seat at the table
Mm.
at these bigger international institutions. And they are going
Mm.
to sit up and make sure that
Mm.
democracy would work. That
Mm.
being said,
Thank
independence of the judiciary should also be much more important, where the Electoral Commission as well must also be empowered to take major decisions without any political influence. That is also something that I believe that we could also empower those institutions to also work to reduce these influences that happens. For instance, in Ghana, when you come, there is this something that's quite interesting. When the opposition goes and when there's a position part, when the government is leading, he goes along smoothly with the Electoral Commission, and immediately he loses power and he goes to opposition. Then it becomes much more difficult for the opposition to now deal with the Electoral Commission, and it has been a trend for a while. You know,
Mm.
where the opposition are usually always against the Electoral Commission's
Electoral Commission.
decisions here and there.
Mm.
But I think that if we allow the Electoral Commissions, the judiciary, and other
Mm.
stakeholders to work more independently, it will go a long
Mm.
way to shaping our democracy as a
Mm.
continent. Now, to the key question that you asked me in terms of the call that happened between, or the relations between Ghana and Ukraine. One major issue, or one of the trends of Ghana is for mutual cooperation and agreement, friendly neighborliness to other countries within the continent and also outside the continent. But when Kwame Nkrumah established the foreign ministry, one of our foreign policy was not to look to the west, to the east, but we are looking forward, which basically means that we are not aligning to any of the
Mm.
external, either to the west,
West.
or
Or the
to
East.
but we are looking at agreements, engagement, and policies that would benefit us as a country, you know, And this new government that came up are beginning to revive that sense of um, urgency in terms of not looking forward. So we look at having partnership even with Russia, having partnership with Ukraine, and having partnership with. In fact, during the Russian-Ukraine war, I think during that period, the Ukrainian government came to establish their embassy in Ghana. You know, all these things were strategic moves where Russia already has its embassy here, and now they are now looking at other places where they are also establishing in the Sahel areas for much more collaboration. As people have
Mm.
been saying, whether if the Russian-Ukraine war is being fought in the Sahel or it is truly fought in Ukraine, because of these kind of competitions that they are now trying to look for much more partners to rally behind them. But what I can say to this call, despite the agreement in terms of um, the supply of these weapons to help us in fighting our security, Ghana has been looking for. We are looking for partnership that would go. We are talking about democracy today, but if you look at it globally, you would see that more countries are not even looking at the complete values of democracy. A very good example is that of the United States under President Trump. Uh, yes, he is looking for partnership and deals that is going to benefit his country, and he has been out there looking for those people that he can be able to benefit.
Mhm.
Although a bit sometimes they are weird, but he believes that those kind of partnerships and those kind of policies and agreements would
Mm.
benefit him or would
Mhm.
benefit the American people.
American people.
Yes,
Mm.
because for a normal United States country who believes in the principles of democracy, you will not invite the president of Gabon who just took over power through a military leadership and then returned to democratic rule with about 99% or so
Of the vote.
of votes. You will not be inviting that person to come to your country for discussions if you believe in the values of democracy. you know. But but now democracy is there, but people are now looking for other means as to whether
Yeah.
we should go in the full democratic ways through the
Mm.
institutions, or we should take certain aspect of democracy and then merge it with our own interests and our own foreign interests to make a
Mm.
way out of it. Yeah.
Mm.
So briefly, that is what I would say in relations
Yeah.
to that.
All right. So, thank you very much for your time and for your insights, very important insights on this episode, talking about dwindling state of democracy in Africa with focus on Togo, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire, but with a broader touching of other African countries. Thank you very much. We have Gottfried Zina, analyst at DevSec. It's very important we talk about DevSec because
Yeah.
it's African business, African
African business,
soil,
African
and African
collaboration,
soil. It's
partnership.
geopolitical and security analysis on Africa,
Yeah.
from Africa, in Africa. We have to start supporting ourselves in Africa because
Yeah.
nobody will do it for us. And we have to support ourselves because the next generation will thank us for it. And if we don't do it, other people will come and take our other
What
people
belongs
that
to us.
knows the value of our resources will come and take it away from us. So we have to start collaborating more within ourselves in Africa,
Yeah.
support ourselves more, and develop our continent more. So support and engage with DevSec, engage with their work on Africa, their reports on Africa. Uh, Please, thank you very much. So please do tell my brothers and sisters from Ghana. I'm going to visit them very soon to subscribe and follow us at Geopolitics with Abu. Then before we go,
Yes. We'll be happy. I think we'll be happy to receive you in Ghana
very soon.
very soon. Yeah, we're happy. But I will encourage everybody listening to always subscribe, tune in, and then listen to key insights, where geopolitics with Abu. to get the trends of issues happening within the continent, and this would go a long way to keeping you up to speed and knowing what is happening in the continent, even in terms of your decision making and what you have to do within the country. So kindly subscribe and then keep on listening and watching to Geopolitics with Abu.
Thank you very much, brother. We'll talk. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.